Welcome. Hello, I'm Shanda Aiken. I've got Martha Montiel here also, and our presenter today, Dusty Doddridge. Thank you for being here. Martha and I are the founders of the Outdoor Photo Alliance and Horizons Photography, and we are the hosts today for this free webinar. And we are so glad that you are here. Thank you. There's so many that are here and that are coming on. Thank you for spending the time on your Wednesday night to join us tonight. We have a special treat for you. We have Dusty Doddridge from Tennessee, and he is one of our speakers for the Horizons Fall Photography Conference in October. That's the 2nd through the 5th, right here in Durango, Colorado, where I am from. And today we have a sponsor, one of our lovely sponsors, B&H, and at the end we'll have some little goodies to give away, so stick around for that. But without further ado, Dusty, welcome.
Thank you all for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to participate in the conference and to certainly present this evening in the webinar. And thank you all who are joining as we speak, and those of you who might be watching this later down the road. Appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to having this conversation tonight. If we get the chat going, feel free to pop in there with questions, and we'll have maybe some time for questions at the end also. So really appreciate the invitation to be here, and thank you all for joining us. So I will start.
The Q&A is working. And so we will get to see the questions, and we will get to the questions. So if any of you do have questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A for now, and we will get them to Dusty. Thank you.
Fantastic. Appreciate your help. I'm going to share screen, so bear with me over a couple of clicks. I got entire screen, and then I'm going to start the presentation and make sure you all can see the screen. How does that look to you all?
Looks perfect.
All right. Fantastic. All right. All systems are go. So tonight we're going to talk about autumn in the Aspens. A lot of people ask me, hey, what's your favorite place to photograph? And it's kind of an impossible question. But the first place that comes to my mind, at least, is fall color in Colorado. It is just extraordinary and easily one of my favorite places to photograph. I think there's just an unlimited number of photographs to make. I've done tours here over the years, and the most common complaint about the Colorado tour is that people come back with too many images. So not a bad problem to have. But the other thing I love about fall color in Colorado is that you can photograph in any type of light. Sometimes you'll hear photographers talk about, good light, bad light, all sorts of things. But really, it's just what kind of light appeals to you. And I think fall color in Colorado, you're going to experience probably lots of different kind of light. And it's about finding the light that really resonates with you and renders your subject matter that you like in the way that you prefer. So we'll see some of that as we work through the images. And again, some of us might be wide angle photographers. Some of us might be macro photographers, long lens. And there's a little bit of something for all of you at different focal lengths. If you have that one lens that you have to have in your bag every time, lots of possibilities for all different focal lengths. So let's dive right in. I want to pause here on this image because I think, and really the first three images, I want to take some time. And what I want you to do is to look at this image, and I want you to look at the light that's in this aspen grove, and I want you to figure out where the light is coming from. So I'm gonna keep talking because we don't want dead air on the presentation, but I want you to think about, where is this light coming from? One of my favorite little tiny groves. And so what's happening here, now that you've thought about it, is the light is actually coming in from the left of the scene. And it's bouncing off the left side of those aspen trunks and hitting the right side of those aspen trunks. So this is a kind of light in that I really enjoy. I like to call it bounce light. The aspen grove is literally glowing. So the light is coming through the beautiful gold fall foliage, but it's also bouncing off those trunks. And so what's happening in this particular instance is The sun has risen above the horizon to the left of the scene, but it's not yet above the ridge. So the ridge is sort of blocking that direct light. So there is this sort of overhead diffused light that has a slight direction to it. And it's that sort of bounce light that I think is just fantastic in this grove. So when you think about making photographs, I want you to think about three things, I think, in terms of the light, at least. And that is, what's the tonal contrast doing? In this case, it's providing wonderful bounce light. What's the color contrast? If you're a color photographer, we see some yellow against the green. So there's a little bit of color contrast there. And then what's the direction of the light doing, right? Those three things matter a lot. So when I think about photographers that I really enjoy their work, they tend to be very good with composition. They tend to be very good with managing the light, whether it's subtle or whether it's bold. Okay, that's one. Number two. Wow, very different type of light. So what's going on with the light here? There's fog in the aspen grove, which, by the way, is pretty rare, but it's fantastic, when that happens. There's also a little bit of snow there on the ground. And the light is dramatically different. In what way is the light different here? So it's completely flat, right? So there's no direction to the light. There's very little tonal contrast and very little color contrast. So even though we have one aspen tree that's kind of the subject, they're really different images. So the question is, what type of scene do you prefer? Do you like this scene here with glowing light, little bit of color contrast, little bit of interesting tonal contrast, or something that's completely flat? I don't know which one's better. You probably like one or the other. The other thing is, notice on the composition that in the first image, the tree is in the background. So the eye is being pulled through the frame. So we're creating this kind of missing dimension of depth by using the aspen trunks as frames and also putting the subject in the back of the scene. So now the eye is moving through the frame, and completely different here. This aspen tree is in the front of the scene. So the eye is not really being pulled through the frame by the main subject, but we have lots of windows between the aspen trunks where we can see these punches of color. So the eye probably is going to spend more time and kind of look for those little punches of color in this one. Okay, number three that I want to spend a little more time on. So we're looking at the edge of an aspen grove here. These are very young aspen trees. So I love this sort of tall, straight, white sort of aspen trunks here. And this is after sunset. So what's happening here is we have this sort of soft, very diffuse light that's falling on the very edge of that aspen grove. And you have this dramatic light fall off behind that front part of the scene. So we have lots of tonal contrast. We have a little bit of subtle color contrast. So if you notice, there's a little bit of blue in the shadows, a little bit of blue on those trunks. So I love this sort of subtle color contrast between the warm tones of the aspen leaves and a little bit of the blue in those deep shadows and falling on those aspen trunks. So three images, very similar kind of subject matter, but very different, at least to my eye, in terms of color contrast, tonal contrast, and direction of light. Okay, so just wanted to pause and point out those three things and let that sink in. And we're going to transition a little bit. We're going to move into different lens types, different types of scenes, and I want to mention two other words that I like to spend some time on and talk about quite a bit. If I'm trying to make an image that resonates with me and hopefully resonates with other people, I'm thinking about two words. One is magic and the other is mystery. All right, those are abstract terms, but then how do we, from a practical standpoint, put that into a photograph? So let's talk about that for a minute before we go any further. When I think about magic, what's magical? I think about special places. I think about special conditions. I think about unusual, kind of different compositions that maybe you don't see a lot of. And of course, interesting and unusual light. So if you're trying to go for a magical image, if you can check all four of those off of your list, you're probably going to end up with what I would call a magical image. Second one is mystery. How do we incorporate that in an image? I love hidden light sources. You can't really see where the light's coming from. I like to use a lot of shadow. That creates the unknown. Don't use the sky. So there's less context. And then finally, compositions that maybe ask questions that are a little bit more subtle and have more layers to them rather than something that might be so obvious. So if we can bake in a little magic and a little mystery, I think those images are going to be rewarding to us, which is really the first step. And hopefully, if we're sharing our images with other people, they're going to resonate with other folks. Okay, diving in. Here we go. Okay, wild image. Won't forget this scene anytime soon. And this is an image that I think that has a lot of magic to it. It's got some wild color. It's got some mind-blowing color. And the interesting thing about this shot is it's most definitely a long lens shot. And the interesting thing too about that is you could only make this photo by backing up away from those evergreen trees by about 75 yards, using about a 7200 lens, and standing in a place that's about 3 feet by 3 feet. It was a little rise. And it was the only way that you could make that photograph without a drone and include the evergreens in the foreground and those brilliantly red and orange aspen leaves just above them. And you have this wonderful crossover of fall and winter. And we have this sort of repeating pattern of color and evergreens going up the side of the mountain. So when I think about a long lens shot, that's one of my favorites because it was just such an amazing crossover seasons and just a very narrow place where you could actually stand and make that photo. You can no longer make that photo, unfortunately, because those evergreen trees in the foreground are now about 20 feet taller. So, but to me, when I think about magical kind of images, that scene right there, that crossover scene full of color, very bold color, is just full of magic. Same day, just to the right of that scene, here with very simple composition, but we're using this aspen grove at the base, which is brilliant orange. And we're using the snow around it for some negative space to really highlight that subject at the base of the frame. And then again, we have this crossover of fall and winter in the aspen grove and evergreen trees above them. So again, very little tonal contrast. A little bit of color contrast between the aspen leaves and the evergreen and no direction to the light at all. So is this pleasing to you or not? I enjoyed it. It was flat light, but absolutely love those colors popping in the scene here. Okay, a scene I probably resisted photographing for quite a while. I was off photographing another part of the grove, but I couldn't help but notice this amazing directional light, the spotlight that was hitting different parts of that aspen grove below the mountain ridge there. So now we have very flat light on the mountain above and the cloud above the scene there, and very kind of dramatic spotlight hitting the aspen grove and pulling the eye kind of in a zigzag pattern up the ridge there. So very different light, very dramatic. Very bold. Again, maybe you prefer the softer light here, or maybe you prefer the more bold spotlight here. One's not better than the other, just what resonates with you the most. Similar idea here. We have a very dramatic spotlight hitting the aspen grove, and I love the color contrast in this one. So we have this bright spotlit yellow aspen grove against this very dark blue right above it, and a little bit of warm color in the cloud. And again, long lens shot. That's probably feels like a quarter of a mile away. Those aspen trees are pretty small, but I love the color contrast here. I love the little subtle tonal contrast and that directional light that's coming in through the scene from left to right. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, I think our buddy Mr. Matt Payne was here on this particular day flying his drone with his buddy Kane, if I have my days right. But this was a sunrise shoot, and we just stayed there and just watched the sun sort of paint the mountain ridge in the distance. And there was this little cool cloud that was kind of making its way across the valley. And I thought, well, okay, let's just hang out and see if that cloud will line up at the base of the mountain. And maybe, just maybe, if we get lucky, some light will break through the clouds and light up that snow-covered mountain ridge above. So again, we have beautiful tonal contrast, not a lot of color contrast here. We have a little bit of punch of yellow there at the base of the mountain and some blue above, but it's mostly just about that spotlighting effect. And what I think makes this image, adds a little magic, adds a little mystery, is this cool cloud just kind of floating through the valley there. Okay, really different image. Super, super bright sky. I don't normally take images when the sky is this bright, but it was pretty dramatic as the clouds were breaking above the snow-capped mountains. So it's almost like two images that were kind of sandwiched together. You have very flat light at the bottom. There's no direction to that light. And then we have the cloud breaking with really, really super bright highlights and bright lights in the snow on the mountain. So it's a kind of one of those images that I think has a lot of tension to it. We have definitely a lot of high tonal contrast from the bright highlights in the cloud in the mountain to those deep, deep shadows in the evergreens below. Not a lot of color contrast, but definitely a ton of tonal contrast. Okay, now we're gonna show and talk about some of the more beloved scenes. I like to call these classics. And nothing wrong with photographing classic scenes. You know, it may not be your thing, but I think scenes become classic for a reason. They are stunning. They are beautiful. And this is afternoon light with a view of Mount Sneffels there in the San Juans. And the light is very directional here. It's coming in from the right. So this is an afternoon type of photograph, and it's lighting up the aspen grove in the immediate foreground. The ridge on the right, the ridge on the left, and of course, beautiful Mount Sneffels in the distance. Not a complicated composition, not an original or mind-bending composition, but still a lovely place to experience and photograph. Okay, yeah, lovely afternoon scene here. Again, dramatic sort of contrast between the aspen grove and this dramatic rock formation above it. I like to call it the fortress. It's just a wild formation to my mind. The light is very flat. Oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's wonderful to make a photograph here with spotlight either hitting the aspen grove or spotlight hitting the rock face above. I was just kind of drawn to this particular image where the light is very flat. It's not directional, but we have this dramatic, again, almost a sandwiched image between dramatic color and not so much color above it. And certainly a contrast between the forest and this dramatic rock formation. Absolutely love that spot. Love just watching the light pass through there. And just to the right of that scene is this one. So again, afternoon light. It's very directional. It's coming in from the right of the scene. It's lighting up the aspen trees there along the stream. It's also hitting the ridge in the distance on the left. And of course, lighting up the peak and the rock formations there. And you do have some color contrast. You have lots of tonal contrast. And you have lots of directional light. So a bold image. Okay. Now, again, a classic location. Nothing wrong with photographing this spot. This was the scene of my good buddy's, what I like to call the beef jerky incident. I won't go into detail. I will just say if you're in an amazing place and the light gets exciting, to be sure and chew up your food really well before swallowing. Otherwise, it could get dicey. But if we're talking about bold, colorful light, we're talking about directional light. What happened here was we had some really heavy clouds at the end of the day, and it looked like there was just going to be a little sliver below those clouds where that dramatic sunset light was going to be able to break through. And so there was a crowd of people here, which was fine. And sure enough, as we had hoped for, as the excitement was building, the light broke underneath the clouds. It lit up the aspen groves in the foreground. It lit the Chimney Rock feature, and those clouds just continued to swirl pink around that rock formation. And it was just, people were actually just beside themselves, and they were cheering this particular sunset. So it was quite the evening, I would say, out at Chimney Rock. Now, backing up from the classics, again, directional light, side light coming into the frame, and not a lot of color contrast, but some fairly dramatic tonal contrast. So this is completely opposite of the previous few images. This is a scene that you can make your own. So instead of a classic scene like the previous few slides, this is a scene that's going to be super rewarding. If you're watching for the light and looking for an image like this, it's only going to last for a few seconds, and it's an image that is completely your own. And so I think that's what's super rewarding. Fantastic little spotlight hitting that small aspen tree, and a little bit of spotlight highlighting the grass below that tree, and a little bit of spotlight above there. And I just love those type of scenes, and I love that type of light. Okay, putting our long lens, so to speak, back in the bag for a little bit. We'll talk about some small scenes, and we'll talk about a little intentional camera movement, or ICM. So if you're looking for macro work and you're thinking about fall color in Colorado, there are obviously an infinite number of scenes like this one where you can just work with color. You can work with shape. You can work with texture. You can go out early in the morning and there's frost lining these leaves. There's just so much to photograph if macro is your thing. When I first started in photography a couple of years ago, I was doing almost exclusively macro work, working with woodland wildflowers. And I absolutely love that kind of work. But love the color here, the shape, the textures, just an endless variety of photographs that you can make. And this is just one example. Love the scene here. We were out photographing an aspen grove, walking across a field in the morning, still tons of frost around. I just love the frost line leaves there. We have light that's hitting the top of the scene there, very deep shadows. So we have a lot of tonal contrast. We have a little bit of color contrast between the reds and greens, and the light is completely flat. So there's not really a lot of directional light here, but I think pleasing colors, and love the frost in a scene like this small one here. And of course, if you're into ICM, again, infinite number of images that you can make, and just have fun with moving the camera, experimenting with different shutter speeds, experimenting with different camera movements. And you can do this for hours and hours and hours. And it matters not what type of light that you're working with. You can work in very flat light, like what you see here. You can work with very dramatic light, and they're all going to be super, super interesting. And I love just playing and having fun. That's what it's all about. So you can make all of these kinds of images, different types of light, and especially with a little bit of color contrast too. Super fun to work with. Okay, we have to talk about reflections too. So let's hit that subject. Right at sunrise, luckily calm winds, so the water is like glass. And I just loved this sort of triangular nature of this frame. So we have the trees kind of poking up into the sky and reflected in the water there. A little bit of pink and sort of peach color working well with the blue. And just really a lovely sort of almost symmetrical composition. So very soft light, little bit of color contrast. Do have some deep shadows and some bright lights. So lots of tonal contrast here. Same spot, looking a different direction, but a couple hours later. You know, a lot of photographers will shoot before sunrise and maybe a few minutes after, put their cameras in the bag. But I think the idea is just to keep shooting. You never know what the light's going to do. And in this case, we have this beautiful side light. The sun's now above the horizon to the east, which is to the right of the frame, lighting up the aspen grove. So now we get this punch of bold yellow. And again, beautiful color contrast between the yellow and the aspen groves and the blue in the sky. And we see all of this reflected in the beaver pond below. Love working with reflections. A little bit more of a well-known spot now. Maybe not so much well-known back in the day, but completely flat light and completely calm wind. So I love this particular way of framing up this scene. There's a lot of different ways to shoot this location. But I kind of love this implied movement if we kind of move the eye from left to right. Not a lot of color contrast, not a lot of color in those evergreens. So it's mostly just about the reflection and the symmetry of the scene here, which I love a lot. Active atmosphere. Okay, maybe that's my favorite type of scene to work with out in Colorado in the fall. We've already seen an image or two, but let's talk about these a little bit more. Okay, fog in the grove. Again, it's not going to happen super often, but when it does, and we talk about magic, mystery, absolutely love this frame. So we were down the road, maybe a couple miles to the right of this location, and saw what we thought was going to be a cloud that was going to kind of descend, hopefully, into the aspen grove. We got lucky. We were right. The fog hung out here for about 15 minutes, and then it was gone. So it's one of those decisions you have to make, kind of spur of the moment, be willing to move, be willing to take a little bit of risk. But there's something really special that I don't know I can quite articulate about fog in a fall color aspen grove. So the light has no direction. There's not a lot of color contrast. It's basically just yellow and gray. And not a lot of tonal contrast either. So there's just this very soft, sort of ephemeral scene in front of you. No sort of complicated composition technique here. We kind of put the biggest window of color in the middle of the frame and kind of balance it out that way. But for me, if I could photograph fog in a fall color aspen grove, and there was only one place I could photograph, I would pick fog in an aspen grove in fall color, hands down, every day. Now, active weather here, snow is falling steady. So this is a little bit of an open meadow and looking at the edge of an aspen grove. And again, you can experiment with different shutter speeds depending upon how you want that snow to render. You really can't see the snow here unless you look at the evergreen tree that's on the right side of the frame. So I love this idea of crossing over seasons from fall to winter. And I love blending in a little bit of snow blur in the scene there. And I like just a little bit of that evergreen hanging out kind of on that right third with the square composition. Okay, much more snow filling the frame here. Love kind of this yellow in the aspen grove foreground, evergreen trees behind that, and then a subtle yellow in the ridge in the distance. So again, just playing with the different shutter speed, rendering that snow a little bit differently than that first scene. And snowing here, you can kind of, if you look carefully at the evergreen trees, you can see the snow actually flying through the scene in a diagonal fashion. So love the composition here with the aspen tree, a little bit of color contrast between the yellow and the green, kind of negative space around that guy on the right-hand third of the frame. And again, simple concept, but it's active weather. It's a crossover season. Love working with that direct snowfall. Okay. So eventually we're going to have to shift perspective. So what that might mean, it might mean looking up. It might mean looking down. It might mean using a lens in a different way. So let's take a look at some of these images as we kind of are approaching our finish line here in a few minutes and maybe have some time for a few questions. Okay. Classic scene. Not a new composition, but you know what? I still love shooting this kind of scene. It's magical. We have a little bit of directional light. So if you look at the aspen trees in the upper left part of the frame, you can see some light hitting those trunks. And what I love here is we have the best of all worlds. We have certainly color contrast between the warm yellows and the cool blues. We have tonal contrast, so quite a bit of shadow, quite a bit of bright. So the bright is sort of what pulls the eye through the frame. And of course, all those lines are also pulling the eye through the frame. So this is one of those scenes where you're in the middle of a grove, you're looking around, but what you really need to do is just stop and then just look up, right? And then you see a scene like this, and then you have to go, okay, I haven't shot with my wide angle lens this whole day. And now's the time to really use that wide angle lens, turn it straight up, and just have fun with the images that result from that. So that's just a little shift in perspective. Different kind of perspective here. And what I like to do is to think about, what does the camera see that my eye cannot see? So I can't make my eyes go shallow depth of field. Maybe when you're using trifocals like this, everything becomes blurred, but I can't keep anything sharp once I take my glasses off. So this is a way, I think, to make a complex scene a little bit more simple. So one way to do that is to use a shallow depth of field. So shoot wide open, photograph something that's in the foreground, like an aspen tree or maybe a group of aspen trees, and just completely blur the background. So it's almost like a black and white image, combined with a little punch of color. But the idea is to photograph something that you're not seeing with your eye, that most people do not see with their eye, and render the scene in a pleasing way. So it's a little bit of a shift in perspective. Same concept here, but really different scene. So now we went from a mostly sort of monochrome scene to something that is actually full of color, but still the same concept of backing away from that subject that's in the foreground, maybe zooming in with a little bit longer focal length, wide open aperture, blur that background, but to the point where you can still see what's going on and appreciate what's going on in that grove. Classic sunstar. You have to shoot a sunstar at some point, right? So this is just watching the sun rise above the distant ridge, getting to the exact right spot in the grove where you can just get a little bit of that sunlight coming around the tree trunk. And you can see those sunbeams kind of working their way through the grove, kind of pulling the eye towards the sunstar. You see some side light in the aspens on the left. You see a little bit of side light, backlight in that aspen here in the foreground. And of course, this really cool sunstar in the scene. So it's just something different to pull the eye through the frame and a little bit of a shift in perspective. And again, stopped all the way down, f/22 or whatever your smallest aperture might be. And winding down a little bit with a scene like this, I love those amazing stark white aspen trunks, and you set them with the layers of fall color in between them, and it's just super dramatic. I don't know what else to say about that, but that's an image that if you got too close to that grove, you're going to get a lot of the understory in there, and it becomes super busy. So again, the idea in a shift in perspective is to simply back up, right? Use a little bit longer lens and shoot a little bit more of that upper canopy. And that isolates those trunks there, combined with that beautiful fall color canopy working its way through those trunks. Love those types of scenes. Okay. Last and certainly, maybe not least, but shooting little windows. And that's putting something really close to your camera lens. It could be right against your camera lens very physically, or it could be using a long lens, but then focusing on the trunk in the distance or your subject in the distance and kind of blurring something that's going to frame around it. So it's just a little bit of using a frame and kind of using that shallow depth of field for a shift in perspective. Okay. Summary. Here we go. What I would say, just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, is to think about your scenes in terms of both tonal contrast and color contrast. What's pleasing to you? We all have different preferences. And the more that you can understand what your preferences are, you can kind of zero in those subjects in the type of light that you're really looking for that's most pleasing and rewarding to you. Also think about the direction of light. What type of directional light is most appealing and interesting and exciting for you? Is the subject looking good? Is the light looking good? But maybe you just need to move around and find the direction of light that you enjoy the most. And again, hopefully you've picked up, hey, use different focal lengths. Maybe you prefer one or the other. Great. Use that. Get that favorite lens out of the bag, but then force yourself to put that favorite lens back up and work with some different focal lengths. And then shift perspective. Look up, look down, look behind you. Think about photographing in different ways. Not everything needs to be sharp from front to back. We can use limited depth of field and really simplify a scene and enjoy that. And I love this idea, and I'll kind of wrap up on this. I love this idea that landscapes can be teachers. I love this idea that landscapes provide us a connection that we can have a relationship with. So I would like for you to say, or to think about, what landscapes are your favorites? What have you learned from them? And what can you take from your favorite landscapes and apply to other landscapes that maybe you haven't had a chance to visit yet? So that's my summary. I'll finish with a quote from John Sexton, wonderful black and white photographer, and we'll wrap up on that. And if there's a possibility for questions, then hopefully we have some time for that. So from John, I feel quiet yet intense energy in the natural elements of our habitat. A sense of magic prevails, a sense of mystery. It is a time for contemplation, for listening, a time for making photographs. Love that quote. So hopefully there was something inspirational, maybe something practical in the presentation for you. And if we have time for questions, I'll be glad to field any.
Hi, Dusty. Go ahead, Martha.
Yep.
Thank you, Dusty. That was amazing. So we were getting like a lot of great feedback. One of the questions we have is from Renee, and she wanted to know if you can talk a little bit about the Jeep tour that you're doing at the end of Horizons and what kind of images they can expect to get.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure exactly where we're going, but that's really less important, right? So what I would encourage you to do is to think about some of the images in this presentation, just simple shots of aspen groves. I feel confident that we're going to pass by an aspen grove on this Jeep tour. And I would hope that we would pause, jump out, explore. And I think a lot of times people that haven't photographed forests before, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It's like, everything's amazing. Where do I put my camera now? And so I think that's where we can come in and say, well, okay, you know, what's appealing to you here? What lens do you think makes sense for you? We'll give you some composition ideas, and then hopefully we'll back away. We want to leave you alone and let you make your own photographs, but we're there to kind of help you get started and get some ideas if that's kind of where you're at and you haven't done a lot of forest photography before. So I'm confident that we will be photographing in the forest among other types of scenes along the way.
And I can help a little bit with that, since I'm kind of the one who has the details, the back, end details, but we're going to take a drive all the way across the $1 Million Highway, as you know, Dusty, and of course through all of the little aspen groves along the way. But they have specific stops that we'll pull over and we'll get out. So just like you said, we'll pull over, we'll get out. There's a place called That Cabin that's become hugely popular these days. I know the owner and the stories behind it. There's a lot of fun, old historic stories and stories that people think might be the reason that cabin is there. And then we'll continue on through all of the windy roads that just weave our ways through the aspens, and next to there's waterfalls along the way. There's glossy alpine lakes along the way that we'll stop at. So yeah, pretty much everything that you just talked about today and all of the details that you shared with us today will be a part of, what you will help us photograph for sure.
Yep. Good.
Awesome.
We have another question from Cindy, and I think she's asking, where do you like to photograph in Colorado? I think she's probably asking about the region. Do you have any favorite place, Dusty?
Oh man, I haven't found a place I don't like in Colorado. So, I've photographed a lot around the Crested Butte area in both fall color and summer wildflowers up there. I photographed a bit, not quite as much down in the San Juans where we're going to be for the conference. So I'm looking forward to spending some time there and maybe learning about some new locations. I've been up at Rocky Mountain National Park and photographed up there. Certainly love Great Sand Dunes. Always a fantastic place down kind of in the southeast part of the state. So I don't know. Black Canyon of the Gunnison, I think, is an amazing place that people probably overlook because they're going from one place to the other. But if you have time, Black Canyon of the Gunnison is amazing. Easy to photograph from the rim. Kind of a long hike down the river, but I love that location as well. So I think Colorado is just an unending, infinite place to make photographs. I haven't found a place I didn't like in Colorado yet.
All right. I have a question, actually.
Okay.
So how do you decide whether like a full scene is better capture small or grand, like an intimate or like a grand scene?
Yeah, I think that's an up to you kind of thing. I think that's what resonates with you. I think there's some people who love the small scenes. They love the macro. They love that kind of intimacy in their photography because it just resonates from within. And then some people like the really big, expansive work, the wide angle scenes, and that can work too. I'm kind of this weird unicorn that tends to like stuff in between. I like the in-between scenes a lot when it comes to forest photography, especially, and that tends to resonate with me. So it's not depending upon what's going on in the sky. I enjoy macro photography, but I find that man, my attention span and my patience is not as good as it might have been in the past. So those you really have to work to set up, and, the wind kind of needs to be calm and stuff like that. And you got to deal with depth of field. They're very rewarding and very amazing images to make. But my attention and the sort of patience level, especially with wildflowers, is trying. But yeah, I think it's just, you got to photograph from the heart. You got to photograph what resonates with you, and then and then experiment. Maybe find something that you don't know. Oh, I don't know if that resonates, but then maybe you experiment, get out of the box, use a different lens, and then maybe that takes you in a new direction stylistically down the road. But you'd never know unless you experiment and have fun and try. It's a good question.
Awesome. What is this beef jerky incident?
Well, I don't want to name names. So
okay.
I've got myself into trouble for mentioning names on that story. But I can just say that, again, if the scene is unfolding in a dramatic way to the point where people are jumping up and down and yelling and that sort of level of excitement, again, regardless of what your food preference might be, chew thoroughly before swallowing. That's really all I can say about that story.
Awesome. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No. I'm sworn to secrecy now.
All right. Do we have any other last minute questions for Dusty today before we wrap up with just a couple of final things?
I'll ask another question. I don't see questions yet. I see a lot of people saying, thank you, Dusty. Great presentation. Gorgeous photos. I love the variety of shots that you have shown. Thank you. Great presentation. Enjoy the presentation. So a lot of positive feedback.
Cool.
So I have another question. So when you're faced with the vibrant landscape, how do you avoid sensory overload and compose with intention?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of an emotional, excitable person by nature, or at least so I'm told. And I get really excited when I see a landscape like the one that's behind you. Now, I would be very excited to jump out of the vehicle, get my camera bag, and start taking pictures, right? And that's okay. That's not the worst thing in the world if you're excitable like me. But what I probably should do more of, and what I try to communicate to people that I photograph with, is, hey, stay calm. Leave your camera in the bag a little longer as best you can, and just take in the scene, right? And just enjoy that moment. And don't even worry about a photograph. Just do your best to leave that camera in the bag, take it in, and then take a deep breath, right? And then switch gears and think about, okay, maybe how should I approach photographing? Because maybe something you saw, you got initially excited about, maybe now that you've taken some time, you've looked at it a little bit more closely, maybe you notice some nuances in the light, maybe you notice a different perspective, and then now you can end up with perhaps maybe a more thoughtful composition. But I totally get that. I just get excited. I physically run towards places because I get so excited, right? And again, that's okay. But being around more calm people and people who like to just sort of be more methodical, super, super helpful if you can kind of just take a deep breath, leave the camera in the bag, assess the scene, and then switch into photo mode.
Yep. Good thought. Yeah. Actually, I have one more question here or comment. Michael says he didn't see any black and white photos.
Wow. Okay. That's ironic, given that I've just delivered 2 black and white presentations over the last 2 weeks. And so, yes, no black and white in those images, but of course, aspen groves, mountain scenes, dramatic light, subtle light can be rendered unbelievably well in black and white. So I don't feel like there's any kind of limit to the black and white work that you can do in those aspen groves in fall color. And it's odd to me, I guess, that most of my favorite photographers, I wouldn't say most, but let's say many of my favorite photographers are black and white exclusive. And primarily a color photographer, but I try to sort of ease into doing some black and white conversions after the fact. I just may have mentioned this before. I just got myself an IR converted camera. One of my buddies finally convinced me to do that. And it's helpful for me to kind of see it in camera and then think more along that line of black and white or infrared. But certainly forest photography, mountain photography, lots and lots of wonderful black and white work that's been done for 100 years. And I love black and white, and I dabble in black and white.
Yeah.
And we also
are speaking his language.
We also have Cole Thompson, who is going to be one of the speakers at the Fall Photography Conference. And he kind of jokes that he's been invited for a Fall Colors Photography Conference, and he's a black and white artist. But that makes it another fantastic level to that, because he does see, in the black and white and the same scenes that we're looking at, and renders them, in his own way. So,
fantastic work. And I'm sure he'll have some things to add to the mix of the conversation over the course of the conference. But love black and white. If you're a black and white person, you're gonna have a big time.
And Hubo, we have Hubo Hood too.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic work. Fantastic. Love her work.
Here we have another question. It's like in the chat. Can you recommend some good resources for panning locations and routes of travel during the fall colors in Colorado?
Oh man,
locations. We can always answer.
I can answer that one too, because I'm working on, because I'm from this area and this is, my home. We're actually working on a guide. So we'll send it out to our subscribers. So that anybody that wants to come, before or after, or spend a little bit more time here, we're going to plot some areas that we recommend you go and take a look at. So that should be out in July. So be looking for your subscriber emails for that guide.
Also,
Wonderful.
I wrote two, if you're driving from Denver to Durango, I wrote 2 blog posts. So they're on our website. So feel free to check them out, because they have stops along the way where you can just kind of stop and shoot like a different areas. So that's on our website.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Okay. I think that wraps it up for today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you very much, Dusty Doddridge. But before we go, if you register for the fall conference today, you can use Dusty 100 to get $100 off. And the next 4 people to register will also get a $100 gift certificate to B&H Photography.
Wow. Cool.
All right. Courtesy of B&H Photography. Awesome.
Very nice.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Dusty, so much for your time.
Thank you all for hanging out. See you this fall.